All right, welcome to the podcast. Super excited today because I've been lucky enough that I get to spend time with this fantastic human on the regular because I've worked a lot with the team at Halo Radius, which is part of what we're going to talk about today. So for folks that are fresh to the podcast here, my name is Eric Wright. I'm otherwise known as at DiscoPosse on all of the social media handles. So that's why this is the easiest way to find me at the DiscoPosse podcast. And of course, I'm joined by somebody who, again, super excited because I want to dig into what modern development, especially in the AI era and the challenges of like big problems and how do people solve this, because there's a lot of noise out in the world with all the AI craziness going on, but let's jump right in. So with that, Pawel, if you want to introduce yourself for folks that are brand new to you, and then we'll jump right in.
Thank you, Eric. It's really good to be here. It's a new experience for me, so I'm really excited about it. I'm Paweł Kowalczyk. I'm currently the CTO of Halo Radius, which is a software consulting company that specializes in designing and implementing highly scalable software and AI-powered solutions.
Now, the one thing that is amazing when we talk about scale, I think that's what a lot of people get hung up on right away is we say, like, does it work at scale? We'll talk a bit about some of the scale that you've seen, and obviously you've worked at some big ones. But I want to go right to start it off, the very beginning. What got you into development and consultancy as a career, Pawel? Let's take a look at what got you here.
It's a funny and long story as always. Engineering kind of have run in my family, as you know. My father and my sisters worked within engineering, so that kind of created like this foundation and a positive attitude towards that. Obviously, as a young person, I wasn't really into that. At least I wasn't looking that far ahead. So I didn't immediately excel at that, obviously. I kind of felt lost. But I think at some point I got like an internship within one of the tech companies, which was later followed by finally a consulting job, which I started, which didn't last long because I didn't enjoy that at that time as my second job, which was a consulting within and hold. Listen to that, Oracle Zibble. I'm not sure if you even remember what that was, but that was a thing.
That's it. Nice. Old school.
It is. But like those things didn't really at that time like click for me. What changed things around was me interviewing for like this tech, like primer tech company within Poland that I really got excited about it. Like it was even challenging to get there because I had to write some, perform like an interview and write some home assignment, which back then was quite challenging for me. But that quickly turned things around for me, and that was the thing that really clicked. I got the opportunity to work like on a highly distributed system back in the days. It was like, I think maybe 12 years ago, something around that. And I participated in, like a large project, which was quite challenging as this was a legacy one already back then, which was a Death Star architecture, if you recall what that thing was back in the days. Scary thing, lots of moving paths, lots of moving things, and obviously lots of risk involved, but also quite a lot of satisfaction. And I think that was a turning point for me, from which I've learned the most, and I was able to witness quite exciting things, frankly. Like, I was part of the acquisition of a competitor, which effectively allowed us to rewrite the system to be able to cope with the user base of both companies and, in a sense, scale. Given the existing user base, we were able to scale the new system from 0 to like millions tens of millions of users, which was like a unique experience, I guess. And I would say a highlight of my career back then. And yeah,
let's say it's very difficult to get that exposure, which especially in development. And I mean, I came from the ops side of things, and I was lucky that my kind of first major gig was working at a global insurance company. And so I was immediately exposed to legacy environments, pretty significant scale, and they were then going through transition to different desktop environment. Like, so all of this change was happening, but everything had to happen at like 5 to 10,000 person scale. So, then I look back at other people that were in my peer, network, and they're working at smaller shops. And it was so funny that they're working in theory of how stuff works, and then here I am implementing stuff at big scale. And it shook me inside of like, oh, all the stuff I thought I should be worried about, these aren't the problems that I'm dealing with right now. Like, I was seeing problems that I couldn't have imagined until I get to like X level scale.
Exactly. And I think even at that point in time, it's kind of similar because like the teams I worked with were like really tiny, and we had like really large problems to solve. And we had some learnings from previous systems. We were able to discuss the challenges, and we kind of knew what was coming, but obviously the migration itself and the process was really painful at times, but also we benefited a lot in terms of experience. And it's also thanks to the people that I worked with at that time that were really that made like a large impact on my career and what I've become.
Well, and I think that's probably a hint of kind of where you ended up and sort of the style in which you're working with, the team you built now. That I found early on, the mentoring I got by being, surrounded by people who had built these legacy systems and now had integrated them as they've evolved over time. And then I got to come in and be part of this new like wave evolution in distributed systems. And then immediately somebody would come in, and the first thing I would want to do is just like, how do I rapidly download into them all this kind of history and business knowledge so that they can, understand why we're making certain decisions and certain things, because it's very hard when you don't have senior like architect type of thinking. You could be fantastic at like tactical delivery, but if you aren't thinking of things as a system, it's very easy to get wrapped around the axle on like, oh, we're going to attack this small problem. And that's kind of where I feel my value is. But then as a senior, it's more like I look at the larger picture and understand the upstream and downstream impact of other decisions that I'm making.
True, and sometimes that's hard because you end up being not fully understood by other people, right? Because you have those battle scars which you carry,
right?
And this experience which you maybe wasn't exactly the same as your current occupation, but you can kind of transfer it in a way that you can at least ask good questions or try to ramp up in terms of knowledge for the given challenge that you're currently facing, right? But I think, as I say, that period of time and interacting with like really small, efficient, and smart teams that iterated quickly and had a really measurable indicator of performance. So imagine scaling and migration and all this stuff. That I think was really, really important. And I think I try to leverage and go back to this concept as often as I can in my current work. Because, obviously that was working on a product. And after, do we want to go further into the career and how I got into consulting itself? Or do you want to
Yeah, because that's also a big difference too. There's one thing of doing the thing in a place where you're surrounded by, effectively a net of safety that you can move around within the org, but you're not, your things are fairly stable as anything can be in any job these days, especially in tech. But then moving to the consultancy, now you have to rethink, not only are you bringing a service that you normally would do for one organization, but now you have to sell the value when they don't have familiarity. And I as an agency owner now, it was so funny that the individual like contributor mode, when moving to selling that as an agency, offering, it really I had to think hard about, how do I position myself? How do I, I've never had to sell myself before. It's always just like I sell myself to a job interview and then perfect. And then I don't have to worry about selling myself. But as a consultant, you have to kind of always be on.
True. It's a completely different experience, right? If you're like within an organization, you make those baby steps, you can grow yourself, and obviously you get this expertise, which is very I don't want to say narrow, but very specific to the business that you are within, right? And it's an amazing place. I think working within product is a really good thing to do. On the other side, consulting can be something completely different, and often there are different conceptions about how it works. But as you say, it's much more customer facing. You have to deal with a bunch of problems that you wouldn't even think are possible within a single organization, because you obviously interact with multiple customers. The people that you work with are exposed to different cultures, and obviously you want to promote the culture that you're building within your company, and learn from the others as well. But obviously there's like plenty of challenges of trying to find the right spot of being an effective engineer within an unknown organization, right? And try to solve the right problems the right way. That's most beneficial for the customer, because in the end we try to not only get a project but deliver it in the most valuable fashion.
That's right. Yeah.
That's what drives our business. It's not like, I think in the past the common conception was that an expert comes, solves a bunch of well-defined problems and leaves, and that's the end of the partnership. But I think what we are seeing is effectively things change and transform in a way that we are after long-term partnerships where well experienced and battle-tested consultancies come with expertise and try to build the right processes and expose the customers to good practices, or even like solve some of the technical problems and try to share the knowledge just so that this is maintainable and well operated together in long-term fashion.
On that piece, the knowledge transfer is one where I think a lot of companies are a bit fearful when they bring an agency, like I'll say agency, but I mean they bring a consultancy in, because there is that feeling that like, okay, I've been sold the sizzle, as they say, and then when you actually start cooking, it never gets up to the temperature you thought it would, and then often the learning curves are different, and knowledge transfer isn't always seamless. There's a feeling of disconnection sometimes as a contractor versus a full-time employee. How do you navigate those dynamics when you're, as you said, like you get in, promise, deliver, and maintain to the point where they say, hey, you did so good at this, I've got other things that I see you may be able to help with?
I think this is exactly the case. Like we are looking for long-term relationships based on trust and the experience we gain together when collaborating, right? So we don't want to jump into a project and just like deliver a narrow thing which we don't fully understand and just leave it behind ourselves. We really want to learn together and cooperate and share some of the expertise we might have coming from completely different background, right? Because that's what I said before, where like when you're in one place and you get very deeply into a specific problem space, you have I don't want to say a narrow view, but you are you have very focused view on certain things, and people that might come with similar experience but from different backgrounds might actually transfer their experiences and knowledge in an interesting way, or at least provide like a view from different perspective, which is often very valuable in such scenarios. But each organization is different, and there's no silver bullet to be effective within every organization. You have to learn your way through, and sometimes it takes time, right? That's why identifying what's deliverable in certain time frames is most valuable. We have to plan ahead. We can't overpromise, but we have to divide the work in a way that might be valuable for someone. Even incremental deliveries are really what people are after, and
right.
We can't deliver the whole product in like a 1 week, right? But we can make some small changes. We can introduce some processes. We can introduce some the way of knowledge transfer and try to solve those problems that you mentioned throughout the time.
When you're doing that walk in, and I'll say it's a careful balance between confidence and arrogance have to come in as an outsider, because you want to have a strength of, obviously you're bringing incredible talents to the team, but then there's also this weird internal friction, because sometimes they get whether they mean to or not, just psychologically, it's like, this person's not from here and they're about to look really good to my boss. And like, I don't know in development, like culture, how strong that is. I know on the ops side, ops people are particularly nasty. We're an angry bunch of people. They used to call us the BOFH. So we were not known for being a friendly bunch. And it's a very, I'll say, a healthy competition. But when you're an outsider into an ops team, it's a very defensive position sometimes, because you want to say like, hey, we're doing fine. We're just asking for help from you, not like we don't need you. So on the development side, do you find that there's culturally more of a sense of collaboration?
Well, I think it varies on each company, but in general, it always starts with management, right? Often companies, because there are different types of companies and different problems people want to have solved, right? Sometimes, like you mentioned, those include, those come with like a fear of replacement. And in the end, what we are after is collaborating together and working on a common goal, because there has to be like a technical or even business goal to be met. And working effectively together is the best way to avoid this risk, right? And in the end, it comes down to the attitude that management has, and ideally, removing this concept of the external consultancy and internal team is the best approach, because our goal is to like grow the capacity or like the potential for delivering value together. So overcoming that obviously is hard, especially in some of the setups which come with a history of issues or like history of attempts to make things better. I'm pretty sure like plenty of companies that do reorg like every other.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think like a couple of months is now too long for that. But so each company has its history and its internal problems, right? And I don't like avoiding this kind of like competition approach is the best way, because like if someone, that's not the right place to compete against, right? What we really
Right.
want to do is we want to deliver these common goals. Like there are many references in various places. Like working together usually is more efficient than fighting against, especially like from a person that's trying to avoid like getting fired, or like is worried about it that someone will replace that person. It's better to think how one can contribute to the success of the company, because in the end that's what matters. And oftentimes, especially nowadays in the business that we are all in the end we want to deliver value effectively, right? And collaboration is usually the best approach to achieve that.
Yeah, because you can see the difference too when you go into cultures, or like places that are known for a highly competitive culture. Because it's. I remember somebody was talking about the structure of in the software inside Twitter. Was they had all these strange things. So like somebody had rewritten an Nginx alternative. And it's like, why would you do such a thing? Like, why would you look at a open source, freely available, enterprise supportable tool and then choose to rewrite it? And that was because the incentives inside the development culture at Twitter at the time were bringing a new idea or building a new tool was bonus worthy, or it got you, as AWS calls them, the bar raisers. So that was seen as you're going to get noticed because you're delivering a new thing. But so people were like basically inventing unnecessary new things just to be like, yep, I'm driving innovation inside the company. But in the end, that wasn't the right business decision to make, because why would you build an alternative to the thing that actually exists and is fine for what we need?
Yeah, but in a way, you see that was rooted and planted by management there, right? That was the
Right.
culture that was being sold to those engineers. And coming back to your original question, I think even the most competitive engineer, in the end, when there's a problem to be solved, always bends to the idea of trying to nail the problem the right way. At least that would be my hope. And I think that's the approach for us to collaborate. Like we just have to find the right problem and work together, and solving that is what makes us happy usually.
Yeah, well, and I love the tagline of build it right the first time, because people, they don't necessarily think that way. The first thing you think is like, hey, we want to solve a problem, we want to deliver a product, but the ethos of build it right the first time is being literally on the name. Everything how you approach the problem is fundamentally different now, because you're going to architect, design before build. I'm a bit more of a YOLO coder myself. This worse. It's like a vibe coding, to the nth degree, where it's like, I'm going to try something out, fire it into production, see how it behaves, then I'll design it. And that's because I'm not a coder. I never used to think as an architect. And then the moment I changed my thinking to like, oh, I have to design this for durability, it changes those early, what seemed like disconnected decisions. But if you don't look at the whole project with the right total approach, you have micro mistakes that are going to be made all on the way that will have a macro impact at the end.
I agree, and it's always like a process during development. You always tend to learn new things. So obviously, the project and the deliverables evolve during the time. But seeing the whole picture and understanding the actual challenge, because it's not only this, but also building the right thing. Because oftentimes someone wants to build a specific thing, but it might be completely wrong for the problem space that that person is in. So well thought projects usually pay off later on.
And there's the other challenge of, mapping against the constraints that are present. when you come into an org, they have a specific cloud provider that they work with. So how do you manage your team and how do you resource, in areas where you're left with a lot of constraints? Because you could have one client they're all Oracle Cloud, one client that's all AWS, one that's all Google, one that's fully on-prem. They want sovereign AI. It's a really diverse problem set, so you need a diverse team, or at least people that can quickly see those constraints and use them to their maximum.
Well, vendor lock-in is a real thing, right? And it's a really common thing. As a company, we focus on the 2 or 3 major cloud providers, and people with good expertise are always able to properly adapt. But it's also very critical to highlight the limitations and try to find the right solution that maybe somehow opens up for different approaches or different solutions available. And obviously, and there's one more, from my perspective, it's also quite important to note that a consulting company can't solve any problem for everyone. We have to be very specific and have some kind of focus areas at least, or things we specialize within. Because I believe that this is the best approach. Being specialized in a certain area gives the credibility and makes your customers trust that you can deliver the projects based on your previous experience in that very particular space. And it doesn't have to be the same business space, because, as I said before, some things can be transferred and some experiences can be transferred into those opportunities. But
I guess this probably leans towards, we'll talk about this HBR article, and I think it ultimately ends up being not a thing you work from, but it's more it's an observation of what you're actually delivering. Because to do what you're trying to do, where you have to get in to an unknown environment with, they've probably gotten fairly far to reach this complex problem, and they've exhausted, or at least they just recognize they need help. So you're already walking into a place that has a pretty solid challenge ahead. You're not walking in looking for something to do. It's we have a real problem and we need to solve it, and we want to see value start pretty quickly. That's the other thing. As an outsider, as soon as the taxi meter starts running, the CFO is watching that number. And so there's a constant sort of justification as the internal lead, yep, this is the right decision, these are the right people. But the HP article, they had this idea, they talked about the 4 types of consultants. And so there was commodity, which is, routine problems. They say solving routine, simple problems. This would be more I'll say backfill people, where, you need a few extra developers with a particular language skill. There's procedural, which is more in probably people that are building process flow, or process flow, depending on how you say it. So they're building that process flow, maybe introducing DevOps practices, adding CI/CD. And then this next one is gray hair. And I always love this one. We used to call it gray beard, but we're trying to be a little bit more open that not everybody has a beard. So gray hair, folks. This is we've got battle scars, as you described, track record that you've seen projects go from start to finish at large scale. And you learn with every client, and you take that experience and you bring it into each new client. There's this 4th area, they call it rocket science, but that's more hey, OpenAI is looking for a data scientist to do something wild, so that's a very super niche person. So but most people, I think, land in procedure. But gray hair, I feel, is this an interesting sweet spot. So, sorry, that was a lot of me explaining this HP article. I'll include links for folks so they can actually read the article itself. But what do you see in what they've described in the value of this gray hair consultant? And how does this map to kind of your approach with Halo Radius?
I think when building teams and when delivering projects, we really try to focus on the seniority. And in a way, the commodity challenges that you described are something that can be transferred once the real challenges, or like the main challenges, are being solved by a company. So this is where, at that point, you really want to transfer some of the processes and experience to the team for which you've delivered a project, right? So this is like hiring an external company, in my opinion, just to do those repetitive small things doesn't really make sense. It makes much more sense to have the company deliver actual value and try to transfer that internally, so that further challenges can be solved. And I think this is what we are aiming with Halo Radius. We try to solve challenging problems and try to assist our customers in being able to move forward, because like in the end, some kind of measure of success is when one of the measures of success of a consultancy is that after a certain delivery is being made, you no longer need that company for that particular problem, right? This is the real value delivered. And I think this is what we are mostly after.
Yeah, they haven't painted themselves into the room so that they're stuck there. Like that's one of the challenges we often have, because you bring something from outside and there's a fear that there's proprietary knowledge that is going to exit with the last person out the door from the consultancy team.
Well, yeah, effectively, we are building rods together and learning to fish. And once the knowledge is passed, we can try to build something different. And on what you mentioned, I think things change throughout years, right? What we thought was rocket science like 5 years ago is something very common right now. In the past, you thought that introducing like good practices, CI/CD, and all those sorts of things was not achievable for some of the companies, but now it's like a starting point, to even to the extent that you expect that you come with that already pre-built in a way. You know what I mean? That this is something like a foundational thing that you expect to be very straightforward, and it used to be rocket science for some, and those things shift. So we have to really catch up with the trends and be able to try to narrow our expertise, maybe narrow our business to certain areas that we are really going to excel at and that we can deliver the most value at.
Yeah, when you're looking at solution design, where do decisions around like what's an opinionated approach versus a non-opinionated approach come in? Is that again a cultural thing that's coming from that team that you're working with, or do you try and bring, what are the requirements that drive some of those decisions around when to be, very specific and opinionated in an architecture?
It's a tricky one because, as you mentioned, some of the companies come with like serious limitations and specific experiences with some of the solutions, and sometimes to achieve a certain goal you have to go outside of the box, and this is one of the reasons why people hire outside contractors or like consultancies, because in a way we look from a different perspective and bring different experience. So, and the process of introducing new components or like new concept varies from company to company, but I guess the good starting point is an architecture proposal and a debate or discussion around it. And I guess that in ideal situations, the best technical solution that's maintainable and also nails the problem the best way would win. But obviously that's like our dream and not a real reality, because sometimes different things come into factor. Not only technical decisions are being made, right? So there's no silver bullet here. I think it's a process, and we understand each company or like each customer we interact with. In small steps, we learn together and we try to cooperate and try to evolve together. The more trust we get, the bigger, the easier it is for us to introduce major breakthroughs.
Yeah, well, and I get that's the interesting thing is that there's a different type of excitement when you're, doing full time internally versus, coming in for whether it's a project or a specific, platform that's being designed, and you come in at a phase of it. But I love the idea that, in software, it's always called the aha moment. What's the thing that I can give this person a tool, and then they have this like, oh, now like they get really excited and lit up. Software development's different because you're quite literally building the thing that will then create the aha moment. So there's so much more that's done in that scaffolding to get there. So what are the projects that you really get excited about when you look at, what you're about to take on? Obviously, AI stuff is getting interesting, but what are the things that you see as like exciting project and opportunities that you've been working on?
Well, obviously, things that I can impact the most, excite me the most from the start. If I know that I can do something amazing, then this drives me and excites me a lot. Myself, I'm really into platforms, and I know how much that kind of enablement can do for a company to be able to deliver things quicker or like more efficient together. And funnily, I'm really into supporting and running projects long term. I really love that because I kind of feel that like the project itself becomes like this kind of organism that you fix and work on, and even though sometimes you have to change direction completely, I kind of enjoy it, the whole process. And other factor is being accountable for what you do. I really think that once you gain this trust and you know that you're accountable for what you're doing, this is the time where you can actually make the most of the project, and you can make the most bold decisions, and you can deliver the most value then.
Yeah, I guess that's the familiarity that happens just like with any, even with enterprise software. It's always like there's 20 things that this tool can do, but they go in one checkbox at a time because they have to build trust with it. And then now that you're quite literally building solutions, you probably just can't walk in and said, "Oh, you're doing this all wrong," and just run to the whiteboard and just destroy their brains with like, if you did it this way, it would be better. Like, you have to get in, learn, suggest, get feedback loops.
I mean, you can always try. Sometimes doing those kind of bold moves makes sense, and it sometimes causes like a chain reaction situation. But it doesn't work always, right? And sometimes there are things that are fragile, and getting full understanding of the complexities take time. So obviously, different approaches, but it's tempting at times, right?
Yeah. So with AI stuff that's going on right now, what are like? This is just such a unique time. Well, I mean, there's probably, it always seems unique until you go back, you realize that everything's a pattern. But at the moment, there's this real commoditization of access to AI tools, but enterprises are not really going to buy services as much as they're going to build a lot of their internal platforms, especially when we've got, sovereignty for data requirements, security considerations, privacy. There's a whole host of reasons why people want the AI to be their AI, not OpenAI or Google's AI, and always shipping data in and out of their system. So what do you see as some of the complexities that you've recognized, like this is a team problem that we can solve, whereas people who are internal developers they've probably taken a run at it, but it's so new. So like when you get brought in for an AI project, where do they get stuck when they're bringing you in?
Well, that varies, as always. It's not a great answer, but AI has changed a lot of things, and even the way projects are being delivered, or it commodized the access to knowledge itself. So obviously, it drives lots of different opinions, places, and I think you can see that there are limitations of the tooling available. So oftentimes what we see is customers being really excited about a specific new deliverable of an AI company that they're really excited to use. But when they start building an actual product based on that, they see the limitations and they see that this thing just can't perform as they expected it to be.
Right.
Take a look at all those chatbots or like the bots that you talk to when you try to solve a thing with a bank, right? Like choosing a wrong AI solution can seriously damage your business, because the hype that we see currently makes people focus on those areas that are just literally attempted to be copied by different companies, and not always with the right approach, not always with the right data. And I think the main thing, especially for this rise of AI, is that most companies struggle at getting the right data infrastructure in place and like the right data before even going deeply into those AI products that they want to deliver. So I think this is what we see the most.
That's interesting because it would seem that it sounds that AI, most of the AI, bottlenecks are actually data challenges. I'm hearing this more and more as I talk to people that it has to be built on good data, and they talk about like data-driven design, and like we had that back. It was called the mainframe. Like we, the whole world was a data structure, and then you programmed on top of it. Effectively, AI is using that same model, but most people don't think of it that way.
Yeah, I think there are like different things you can. If you think about any kind of technology, if people try to get the technology for having the right technology that is fancy, they end up with poor results. Like think of like any log solution or like traces. Everyone wanted to have traces at that time, but they didn't have the right data behind it, which didn't make any sense. And as I say, I think that's the main challenge that we see. Choosing a kind of copy-paste products or problems and trying to build upon things that others have built and not necessarily things that might work for your business, and not having the right data infrastructure or data at all in place for that. And I think there's like plenty to do in this new world. As I said before, I think we are shifting those borders of what's rocket science and what's just like a common thing that should be standard for everyone every year or even more often.
Yeah.
And we need to really aim higher.
Yeah, what has become normal, expected today was like it was unfathomable to think about a year ago. And it's kind of wild. And that's, I think, we used to, on the ops side, I would always face somebody like, what are we doing around, layer 2 over layer 3, networks? And I'd be like, oh, I see that you got your Network World subscription on the weekend and you decided to read. Like, don't ask me about technology and why we aren't using it. Ask me what's the problem that we need to solve, and do we need to use X technology to solve it? It's easy to get hooked on features and capabilities, but not think about the totality of the system that you're building around it.
And measuring success and whether things make change or measuring success and whether those changes introduced make any sense is very critical for any system. Like, without this insight into what you are delivering, you can't really make data-driven decisions, which are something we should really base on.
Well, and I guess that really is important. What do you do, and how important is that, like the signals that you build within that system in order to measure and build KPIs and success? Because that's quite often we say, like, hey, the system works, I can chat with it. It's communicating with a knowledge base that's proprietary. Great. But no one may be thinking about, is it cost efficient? Is it scalable? How do we deal with failure of subcomponents and stuff like that? So there's a lot of questions that are architecture questions, but how do you measure as a performance metric? Like, hey, the system is doing what we expect and we can improve it by X metric.
Well, identifying the right metric is key, right? Because cost efficiency is not the right metric for everyone. Some companies don't care about it. They just really want to make a game-changing product, right? And for that use case, you have to specify a completely different kind of measure. But I think it all starts with identifying the right metrics and the right indicators and carefully tracking that, ideally with some testing on a certain population. Because, oftentimes you want to measure the conversion in a way, right? So not those things like the cost of running a new thing. You want to measure how much value it brought to your business, and that's what makes it really tricky. But spending some time ahead of that and trying to understand what problems you are solving helps with identifying the right metrics, and then you can focus on try to optimize for that specific goal, because you can't optimize for everything, and it's not always worth it. So I think in the end we want to base our decisions on data, and it's the judgment and the decision making capability that allows us to progress further, and we have to cooperate on establishing the right indicators of what needs to be done next.
Yeah, don't optimize too early, because quite often that's and the funny thing is, we, like, by nature of, like, we're nerds, we love to find like little things. Oh, I've got this great idea. I can fix this library. I can cut the code down to like 11 lines instead of 14. Like, we get excited by little optimizations, but if you don't think of it as a total system approach, you realize, like, don't bother with that. We're good. This is not the optimization we should be chasing.
I mean, it varies from business, right? Obviously, coming back to like the cost, even for like businesses that don't care about the cost, it's always worth measuring stuff. And usually, it's better to just measure things, more things than you actually find, and more things that you think that you need. Because sometimes in those corner cases, or like in case of any problems, you better have more data than less. And obviously the data has to be of good quality. And there are use cases in which you have to focus on performance and do some part in assembly or whatever. There are such projects, right? So it's not that it's that common, or like every project is like this. Every project differs, and we have to deliver the right solution for the right problem.
Well, something definitely stands out. I mean, it's I talk about patterns. Your approach is consistent. Like, if I ask you a question, you don't. To me, like, you never want to come across as like, oh, I know the answer. You immediately sort of turn the question of like, there's a lot of factors. This is how I would approach it. And it's amazing. Like,
I try to be.
Every interaction is done that way. Whether it's unconscious, but it's like it speaks volumes to like, this is not, you didn't like learn this approach to just like solve a consultancy problem. Like it really feels like this is born into you and how you approach a lot of things.
Well, I've heard that this is a negative thing in consulting once from one person, which kind of expected that we would come with only like a pitch kind of discussion with solutions to problems that we didn't even define then. Yeah. And I think that during this discussion, you asked how to collaborate in maybe a setup or organization that might be afraid or might not know what's happening, right? And I think it's all about collaboration, and it's worth trying to fully understand the problem and try to address it together and collaborate on that, as opposed to, it's always easy to make bold statements and try to justify them, or try to work your butt off just to be able to make sure that your point is right. But there is time at which you have to think through and try to adjust it the way you think. And this reflects the projects, right?
Yeah.
What we agreed is the best approach on Monday might not work 2 weeks later, because things change.
Yeah, and as you said, it's I often describe this. There's a big difference between wanting to be right and wanting to get to the right answer. We as humans, I'm not going to lie, I do enjoy when I get the right answer before anybody else, but I really am more interested in that we've agreed that this is the right answer for a bunch of reasons, not just, to come in and, beat your chest and like, we know more than you because we're experts and we've been doing this. And I know right away that it's easy to bring you in because I don't worry about my team getting scared of like, Powell's going to come and just tell us that we're wrong. It's like, no. He's going to ask questions.
I mean, solving a problem usually is an effect of multiple things combining together. There's enablement that happens, and multiple people can contribute to that, even though one person finds the right solution. So we have to be mindful of this, and I think in the end we are in this together, and that's what we aim for and try to collaborate on.
Well, and you also mentioned that durability of both platform and relationship are both very equal. That you're not necessarily looking to like build a thing that you can just proudly leave behind and walk away from. You want to look for what are other continuous things that we could do now to find the next outcome to work towards, or further refine what goals we achieved in that first, sprint, first epic, first total delivery. So how do how does this work relative to other agencies or other consultancies you may have seen or worked in, where you have a very strong relationship approach more than just, we want to tick off as many projects as possible?
Well, this is the second agency I'm in, and in the previous one, I also had the opportunity to shape the approach that we participated. So maybe my perspective on that might be only limited, unfortunately. But I think that this long-term approach and enablement that we try to sell to the company gives us the opportunity to work on those demanding projects, and also once things are fully transferred or those initial problems are solved, this is the time where you can contribute by those optimizations that you mentioned, right? This is the right time to do cost optimizations or like any kind of optimizations once you get to the point where things are really serving traffic or are solving actual problems for the company. And I think that this long-term, well, I really believe that conceptually it's better to bet on those long-term partnerships as opposed on to doing plenty of smaller gigs with very repetitive problems, because those kind of narrow your expertise. You end up being really good at solving things which are not that impressive anymore, especially nowadays where things shift really fast. Hence, I believe that we should really focus on solving those bigger challenges and being able to automate whatever we can and transfer whatever we can to the customer just to sell this confidence in what we are delivering.
Well, and it also gives you that life cycle approach, because I love to use the example of the San Francisco Bay Bridge is sort of famous that there's a team that goes through and they paint the bridge because it's red. It's not really, it's got to have this beautiful, vivid sort of brown red color. And so they basically there's a scaffold that just tracks along the bridge, and it goes from one side all the way to the other. And it takes around 6 months to do each side. So quite literally all they do is go back and forth across this bridge consistently because it takes a year to paint both sides. And every year they just repaint it and start all over again. But that is that iterative thing that you're not just coming in, I'm going to paint it, pat yourself on the back. Good job, Halo Radius. We're out of here. Like, no. We're here to build a thing that's sustainable.
It's not possible to expect that kind of bridge to last forever, right? Once you do it, but what you can do is you can try to provide tools that enable this to happen quicker in future, right? So this is what you can improve there.
Well, I can say enablement is a theme, and it certainly comes through in the way you've been, in conversation. I've been lucky enough to have some really cool chats with you. There's a bunch of stuff I was thinking we could talk about. We didn't get a chance to, but we'll probably have you back to talk more. I love the style of approach, and it sticks out with my own experience as a client of external consultancies. We used to really struggle where, it felt like there's a checkbox at the end, and that's what they were always striving towards was, can we just check all the boxes so that we can, get out of here? And I love that you're never thinking that way. You're just like, what's the right thing to do so that we can leave this with the right results? So I guess for folks that want to connect with you, Pawel, what's the best way to do so? And obviously we'll have Halo Radius. We'll have links to the website, haloradius.com, and you're there on LinkedIn, and I imagine that you're there as well. So what's the best way if people want to get in touch?
I think LinkedIn is one of the ways to do that. We can share the contact details with you, and my virtual presence is not that strong. I somehow am very skeptical towards that, but I think those are the best ways to approach me.
The interesting thing is you don't always want to go with the shiniest object. You want to go with the object that has the right ore inside it. And quite often you see a lot of, we've got developers, streamers, and all this sort of like DevRel is about like evangelizing, but it's very much that person-centric more than like solution-centric, I find. So I like the fact that you're hard to find. That means that you're doing the right thing. You're focusing on outcomes, not your own how many hits you got this week.
I mean, it's it might be because I'm also more interested in being hands-on in a sense. So that might explain it, right? That's how I try to position myself.
Well, it's, if you're gonna get a bodybuilding coach, you want one with muscles. If you're gonna get a developer that you want to have a thoughtful approach that is focused on outcomes, history's in the making. You've done it, and you can both build it right the first time and then continue to build it right as we go into other places. So awesome. Well, Pawel, thank you very much. It was a real blast. And hopefully I know you've got a lot more stuff that's coming up. The team's working on some really neat things, and AWS reInvent is coming out sooner than one would think. So I imagine we'll see all sorts of new announcements and stuff that comes around that. So there'll be lots. I may bring you on and we can talk about the wildness of what goes to the news versus what we're actually seeing in the real world.
Yeah, looking forward to that as well.
Awesome, Pawel. Thanks so much.